All right. You want to talk about child abuse?
Yeah.
All right.
So is 2503 a crime?
By the Texas Penal Code, yes, it's a state jail felony.
Okay. And what do the police tell you when you go report that crime?
It's a civil matter.
Right. And really, a lot of times, what's happening with child abuse is basically the same thing, but it's not quite that blatant. So let's say a parent abuses or neglects their child, and CPS finds reason to believe. Reason to believe is defined as by a preponderance of evidence on that investigation finding form. And so there's already a preponderance. That preponderance should at least lead to an arrest if they have finding of child abuse. But what's really happening is the criminal courts are just letting people slide left and right. And so CPS basically, or the DA says, we're not going to take charges even though this CPS found abuse. But you're welcome to go fight that in civil court.
But not reporting child abuse is a crime.
Well, right. In this case, it was reported and CPS found their version of guilty. But the DA didn't pick up the charges. They said, even though CPS had enough evidence, we don't have enough evidence. So that's where it starts to get kind of muddy.
Because now they're using two standards of proof.
Right. So they say, well, or what I've really been digging into is the criminal stats lately. So either the DA won't pick up the charges, even though CPS says there was abuse, or there were charges and the DA will just turn around and dismiss them, give you pretrial diversion or deferred adjudication for child abuse, which sets that person free to go litigate their case in family court and go hire attorneys and spend money. So now you got one person who's legitimately a protective parent, and they're saying, I need to fight in family court because the DA didn't do their job. That's a tough spot to be in. Now, a lot of those protective parents, they want to reform family court because the DA didn't do their job. And what I kind of realized about 6 months ago or so was that, truly protective parents, where the criminal court has failed them, they shouldn't be wanting to reform the family court. They should be wanting a compelling state interest to be upheld. Hey, when my child is abused, the state's supposed to protect my child. I shouldn't have to do it because it's not a compelling parent's interest. It's a compelling state interest.
Child welfare.
Child welfare.
Right.
And in 2023, there were 77 children who died with a prior history of CPS. So if there was already a prior history, what are the chances that CPS didn't implement their compelling state interest? Probably pretty high. How many times should a child be abused before they're protected? I'd say once.
Well, what type of abuse? Because there's these days, taking a cell phone from your teenage daughter is considered abuse. It's not a parenting right or duty, I suppose.
So in 2023, about half the deaths of children had a prior history. So there was roughly about 150 that year, child deaths. And half of them had a prior history. So it just really seems that CPS probably botched up those 77 prior cases pretty bad and weren't implementing the compelling state interest. They were saying, yeah, the child got ran over by a car, but they'll be fine.
Well, the type of people CPS hires.
Yeah, they can't even flip burgers at McDonald's.
Yeah, some of them, they're basic, very basic people on this planet. Very, very basic. And I'm sure there's smart people at CPS too, but some of these caseworkers, they're straight out of high school, with no real education. And so these people are using a lower form or lower standard of proof to allege that you've done something so bad that it removes your child from you. But on the flip side of that, a lot of them often overlook the cases that really need protection, and children lose their lives over it. So if a state has a compelling state interest to protect children, you would think it would be on the state to hire qualified people to ensure that their commission is compliant with their rules, their laws, right? Policies, procedures.
Right. So a compelling state interest, it cuts both ways.
Right.
It shouldn't be cutting into the fit parents, but yet when they find abuse, so here's a funny thing: when they find abuse with reason to believe, you have to go take parenting classes. Now, I started researching those parenting classes. It turns out you don't even have to take a test to finish the classes when you get your kid back. So it's actually harder to take defensive driving, because you have a test at the end of defensive driving, than it is to abuse your kid and then get your kid back. You just have to click next, next, next until you finish the class. That doesn't seem very compelling to me. It doesn't seem like a very big interest. They're not very interested if you don't even have to take a class to get your kid back.
Well, a judge has a compelling state interest to uphold the law.
Right.
We know that.
And then there's one more stat I'd like to go over, and it's probably the scariest stat. I started researching criminal statistics, and in 2023, there was 1,471 people who were charged with sexual abuse of a child who were given deferred adjudication. So anytime you see some news article about some severe form of abuse or whatever, you'll see these comments below like hang 'em or wood chipper or whatever. While all these comments don't realize, a lot of these people are just walking away scot-free. There was a case about a week ago down in Cameron County where a 15-year-old child was killed by being tied to the bed and all kinds of horrific things. And the woman in the case got 10 years probation for the child dying. They reduced the charges from manslaughter or whatever it was down to injury to a child for the child dying, and then followed by 10 years probation. And
so you can tie a child to a bedpost here in Texas and get probation
after the child dies.
After the child dies.
So, what I would say to the protective parents is to not try to reform family court, because family court it practically shouldn't even exist.
Well,
but try to reform criminal court. Stop these DAs from letting these child abusers walk away scot-free.